Not only was the New Orleans Saints win over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers important for the team and their playoff hopes, but it was also the most important win so far of Dennis Allen's career. We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Saints, your daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host, Ross Jackson, credential media member covering the New Orleans Saints as a senior writer and reporter over at Saints News Network. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, we're going to be giving you the injury updates that we got from Dennis Allen on his Monday conference call that brings some good news, some bad news, and still some question marks. So I'm going to tell you the three units that made the biggest difference for the New Orleans Saints in their win against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Well, three elements, four units technically, if we want to be specific about it, right? And of course we do. So we'll take a look at that. But first, I want to lead off with Dennis Allen and his biggest win of his career, again, coming in Tampa now for the second time. I'll give you those details and what I mean by that here in just a moment. Appreciate you for being an everydayer and for making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget, today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by friends at FanDuel. Head over to FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. Tell you more about them later. Want to start off with Dennis Allen, his biggest win of the season. Now, as you all know, right? As you know, I have been very critical around Dennis Allen, around the coaching staff, all of that, all throughout the season here so far. I haven't been rah-rah, time to fire him, but I made the case that if the New Orleans Saints wanted to go that route, why it would be warranted to have that conversation. Have continuously made the case about why I believe that he will be the New Orleans Saints quarterback in 2024. Now I can tell you basically it's a sure thing, right? And not that a lot around that Tampa Bay Buccaneers game alone was going to change that, but there was enough done there when it came to that Tampa Bay Buccaneers game for it to be the most important game of Dennis Allen's career. And the second time that has happened now in Tampa. Basically, the way that you need to look at this, or the way that I look at it, you don't need to look at it this way. The way that I look at this is Dennis Allen's biggest game in his career before this game was the 9-0 interim coach opportunity and win that he had in Tampa back in 2021. Sean Payton was out. He wasn't able to coach. I believe that was another like COVID absence or whatever. Dennis Allen comes in. He leads this team to, using Taysom Hill and doing all these things, kind of going that like grind it out, stay on the ground, win with the defense type of approach, and then leads the team to a 9-0 victory against Tom Brady and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in Tampa. That's effectively one of the biggest pieces of his resume that got him the coaching job in the first place. Now, in a really fitting sort of turn of fashion or turn of fate? Turn of fate? Yeah, turn of fate, right? Now in a really, really just sort of impressive or really kind of symmetrical, turn of fate here, you see him now get his next biggest win of his career up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in this 23-13 win that did, many things on a long list of things. It proved to the New Orleans Saints organization what it was that they wanted, that they would be justified in giving him that third year as their head coach in 2024. The Saints want Dennis Allen as their head coach. They like Dennis Allen. And a game like this win against Tampa Bay Buccaneers kind of reinforces the good things. And if you can reinforce the good things, all of a sudden, all of the question marks and everything become really, really quiet very, very quickly. Is it the right decision? Is it the wrong decision? We'll know that by the end of 2024. But as of right now, the New Orleans Saints want Dennis Allen to be the head coach, and were made to feel that is indeed the right decision, made to feel more comfortable in that right decision that they were probably going to make anyway, but just the extra confidence that comes with that. It also helped to keep the team alive in the playoff race. I mean, going to Tampa, losing to Tampa, and then having to watch them put on the NFC South champion hats and, the South isn't enough and the t-shirts and all these other things. Like, they would have had to watch all of that happen or know at least that was happening off the backs of their loss in Tampa. Instead, they come in, they get the win, they delay that for a week and now don't have to deal with it they kind of can continue to focus on controlling what they can control. And speaking of that, he proves again that the Saints have fight in them, right? I mean, this is one of the big things. I mean, as much as Dennis Allen kind of repeats some of those kind of like cliches, coach talk kind of stuff, everything like that, one of the things that he always talks about is how proud he is of his guys for fighting. This was another example of that. Late in the Los Angeles Rams game was an example of that. You wish that the team wouldn't have come out so flat earlier because you saw what they were able to do down the stretch there against the Giants, against the Panthers. They fought and won those games by big margins. This was one of the only underdog road wins that Dennis Allen has led in his career, and certainly with the New Orleans Saints. Most of the time when the Saints have won with Dennis Allen as head coach, they've already been favored in those matchups, the Giants, the Panthers twice, so on and so forth. But this was a game in which they went on the road as underdogs, which is not the easiest environment to play in, playing against a team that was ready to clinch their division, and you come away with a win. So that's pretty big as well, to just sort of come in and have that dub after the odds are entirely against you. And to me, this was a statement win for against a team that looked familiar in terms of how the New Orleans Saints have built their team, but slightly different in a way that, like, you don't want those guys to be better than you are out on the field. What I mean by that is that you've got a defensive head coach in both places, Dennis Allen in New Orleans, Todd Bowles in Tampa. You've got sort of this defensive team, this team that builds its identity off of its defense. Tampa's defense is really good. The Saints defense has been its story since 2017. The quarterback approach, going with the new quarterback, going with the veteran quarterback, but vastly different. The Saints gave $150 million quarterback to their or contract to their quarterback. Baker Mayfield is on, this small 1 year, try it, prove it kind of a deal, right? Now, Baker Mayfield and Derek Carr, I would take Derek Carr over Baker Mayfield any day. I would take Jameis Winston over Baker Mayfield any day. However, for a little while, it was starting to look like Tampa made the better decision by going the cheaper veteran quarterback route than the Saints going the more expensive veteran quarterback route. But I think you've seen the change in Derek Carr, more accountability, better play on the field, being able to lead the team, building connections with those tight ends, which we haven't really seen all season, all of those pieces. I think you've seen some good stuff from all of that. That kind of makes you go, okay, well, that's why you go and you spend the money on a veteran quarterback. And I know a lot of people make a big deal out of Derek Carr's contract. It's not that big of a contract. And I've said this over and over again. It's going to be like, it's outside the top 10 for contracts, which he is outside the top 10 as a quarterback talent, right? And then you look at new contracts that are going to come in, new deals that are going to come in for younger quarterbacks, all that other stuff. Like, he's just going to fall further down the list in terms of how much money they're actually putting forward and what that contract looks like. It's not that dramatic a contract, but it was dramatically different than the approach that the Bucs took with Baker Mayfield, in a way that you don't want Baker Mayfield and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to come out here and look better than you are when you're the one that went out there and did the more traditional, let's go grab the new veteran free agent quarterback, the big name, the big fish, and bring him to the Big Easy and see the benefits of that. Meanwhile, another team was reaping the benefits of a 1 year prove it quarterback deal. So good for New Orleans coming out, good for Dennis Allen coming out, good for Derek Carr coming out and being able to get that win in Tampa, what ends up being now the most important win in Dennis Allen's career. And who knows, maybe there were some lingering question marks about, is he the guy, is he not the guy in 2024? And maybe this game did end up changing some minds if there were any question marks, but it doesn't feel like there were that many question marks within the organization at all. Now, did it change the mind of the overall fan base, of media, all of that? Maybe a little bit here, maybe a little bit there, but a lot of it not, right? So we're still waiting to kind of see what that's going to look like in 2024, potentially a little bit longer here in 2023 if the Saints surprise and get a playoff spot. But as of right now, at least you know that Dennis Allen did what he needed to do to solidify with the Saints organization his standing and how he will be the head coach in 2024. Coming up next, we're going to talk about the 4 units that made the biggest difference for the New Orleans Saints in their win against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and how they warded off everything that Tampa needs to be able to do in order to play to its identity. We got that coming up for you as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by our friends at FanDuel, America's number one sportsbook and our official sports betting partner here on the Locked On Podcast Network. The FanDuel folks really like the New Orleans Saints in this upcoming game against the Atlanta Falcons, the Saints' favorite at home, minus 3.5 points. Yes, I know you lay 3 points when it comes to home field advantage, so maybe it's a little bit more of a pick'em between these two teams, but I expect that line will continue to creep up in favor of the Saints as the money continues to flow in. And maybe you want to let a little bit of your money flow in, have a little bit of fun during the final game of the year. If you haven't tried out FanDuel, now's a great time to go ahead and get started, because right now new customers are getting $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you just place a $5 bet. That's it. As long as your first bet is a $5 bet, you get $150 in bonus bets, win or lose, doesn't matter. The app is super safe, super easy to use, secure, all of that. Live same game parlays. They have a new Explore tab for you to find great stuff. You can go ahead and find the Parlay Hub, which gets you all the popular parlays as well. A ton for you to check out. So go and try them out today. FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, family, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. Big thank you for being an everydayer out there, making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget to go and check out the Locked On Sports Today YouTube page, our first ever national 24/7 sports YouTube stream. Be a part of history by checking them out today over at Locked On Sports Today. All right, so I want to take a look at the 4 units that made the biggest difference for the New Orleans Saints in their win against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And if all 4 of these units don't play their role, the Saints do not win that game. So everything had to go well. Everything did go extremely well. Could they have found another way to win the game? Sure. But these 4 units made the biggest difference. First piece of it for me is the secondary over on the defensive side. The second part is managing protection on the offensive side. So for me, that's about the offensive line, and it's about Derek Carr. So it gives us offensive line and quarterback. And then finally, the trenches over on the defensive side of the football as well, particularly the pass rush. So 4 different units there, to where if those 4 units don't work as smoothly, as cleanly in contact or in concert, and don't, come in and be able to do the things that they were able to do against Tampa, then the Saints probably don't win this game. And I want to give a quick mention of a 5th one. We'll call it an honorable mention, and that's the special teams units. I talked about Lou Hedley and Blake Gillikin. I knew I was going to do that eventually. Blake Grupe. It took all the way to week 17, week 18, but I finally did it. Blake Grupe being, having probably their best performances so far this season, especially Lou Hedley up against Tampa to help, field position, put points on the board, all those other things. So I do want to mention special teams as well. So let's go back here. Let's start off with the secondary, my number one here, because to me, it was the Saints secondary that set the tone in this game. You saw it earlier from Pete Werner, who played one of his better games, getting those tackles, kind of solidifying and kind of doing what it is that DeMario did up against the New York Giants, where like his first 11 snaps, Pete Werner's first 11 snaps weren't as impressive as DeMario's against the Giants, but the first 11 snaps for DeMario in that game really set the tone for the Saints defense. Pete Werner kind of did the same thing, getting into the backfield, big tackle for a loss early, big hits earlier, tackling on first contact, getting players down on first contact, all these things. He ended up kind of setting that tone, so I love seeing that. Of course, the takeaways, right? You had 2 interceptions. You had a third one if you include the 2-point conversion that kept a deficit from shrinking to a 1-score game thanks to the offsetting penalties. You had the forced fumble by Jonathan Abram. You had the heads-up fumble recovery off the Trey Palmer kind of self-fumble, the Diamond Dallas Page self-high-five, self-fumble. All of those were situations where the coverage, the secondary, made big plays to keep the game going in favor of what the offense had set up over on their side of the ball. Baker Mayfield had 11 incompletions in this game. 2 of them were drops. But 3 of them were forced incompletions, i.e. either pass breakups or the player, the defensive back doing something that caused that wide receiver or pass catcher to not be able to catch the ball. You had 1 from Isaac Adam. You had 2 from Paulson Adebo. I think you could make an argument that Isaac should have 2 as well. You had 1 pass that was batted at the line, and then you had all of that kind of come together. So you saw that it wasn't just incompletions that were happening between Baker Mayfield and his pass catchers because of some communication issue or because of some passing issue or whatever, like the Saints were affecting the ball in the coverage side of the game, whether it be in the secondary or in the trenches with that batted pass. Sticking in the trenches, the Saints pass rush, they had 11 total pressures, which isn't a ton of pressure, but they had them at big moments and situations. You saw a lot of third down pressures. You saw a lot of situations where either, the Saints were getting pressure when it was a drive-ending opportunity, or they were getting pressure and pinning the Buccaneers back a little bit further, and that might have impacted their third down and stuff like that. So it was just well-timed pressure by the New Orleans Saints defense, and a lot of it coming from the defensive line. Zach Bond, I mean, the guy should have just been rushing the passer his entire career. I mean, you see it here. You saw the phenomenal spin move when he came in on the inside of the right tackle there, being able to get, it wasn't a sack, but being able to get his hands on Baker Mayfield, take him to the ground, kind of let him know, hey, we're here, we're coming, all that. He had another one where he just basically out-muscled an offensive lineman. So for all the conversation around, and I've been a perpetuator of this, for all the conversation around Zach Bond not being able to be a full-time pass rusher because of his size, I think that he's shown you now in 2 of the last 3 weeks that if he locks up with an offensive lineman, that like he has the strength to get a win. In addition to being able to adjust his leverage, having the athleticism to dip, ghost, do all those things that he does with the inside shoulders and all that. I mean, just really, really solid stuff when it came to all of that. And then Brian Brzee now holds the rookie defensive tackle record in sacks for the New Orleans Saints with 4.5. So pretty cool to see that as well. 4.5 is a good number of sacks to have when you're an interior rusher like Brian Brzee is, right? Guys on the outside, 4.5 is like it's a respectable season, but guys on the inside, like 4.5 sacks is a really, really good stat for him, especially coming into his first year and being as electrifying as he has been so far. Heck of a first-round pick. Finally, a Saints first-round pick on the defensive line pans out again for the first time really since, Cam, probably, right? In terms of the last, real one to pan out on the defensive line. I guess you could say Sheldon Rankins too, right? Just didn't get the next contract, all that other stuff. But anyway, so huge stuff there. Now, let's go to the offensive line to wrap this up, or the offensive side. So this comes down to the offensive line and Derek Carr. I think the offensive line did a good job. They kept Derek Carr clean, and what was also a signature win for him, too, especially that first half. He played incredibly well. He was only pressured on 7 different snaps, despite the fact that the Bucs blitzed on over 50% of their defensive reps. Now, if you know a lot about Todd Bowles and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense, hearing that they blitzed over 50% of the time is not surprising, but hearing how effective the Saints were against it is, because they have struggled when it comes to pass protection pretty much all season. And then all of a sudden this game kind of goes really, really well. A big part of why the Saints were able to be so good against the blitz was that Derek Carr himself was really, really good against the blitz in this game. I want to shout out the offensive line for, paving some holes in the run game as well. Jamal Williams is like one of those guys that ends up getting better as he gets more carries. I think you saw that later on in the game against Tampa. So I do want to mention that for the offensive line as well. But Derek Carr, against the blitz was fantastic. So 51% of the time, right? 51% of his dropbacks, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were sending the house, right? They were blitzing. Derek Carr against the blitz was phenomenal in this game. 12 of 17. Okay, so blitzed a lot, right? 12 of 17. That's a 70.6% completion percentage against the blitz. 110 yards. Remember, he finished with 197. So the majority of his yards came against the blitz. Both touchdowns came against the blitz. And then he had one moment where the Bucs sent a perimeter blitz over on the left side, and Derek Carr did the thing that you expect to see veteran quarterbacks do that we haven't seen a ton from the Saints offense. We haven't seen a ton from Derek Carr, is go directly to, in terms of your target, the side of the football where the pressure is coming from. And they did that, they got the ball out. He ends up picking up some extra yardage on the catch and run, stuff like that. Like, those are the little things that you expect when you go out there and you get that veteran quarterback, as opposed to leveraging more of your future on a younger quarterback and all that. Those are the things that you expect to see. And I think Derek Carr did a fantastic job against the blitz in this one, particularly in the first half. All right, coming up next, we're going to be taking a look at how the New Orleans Saints injuries have shaken out, including an update-ish on Alvin Kamara. We got that coming up for you as we continue on and wrap up today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends at PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the easiest and most fun way to play daily fantasy sports. There's no better place to do it. No, fake lineups or, hidden, spreadsheet wizards and all this other stuff where you're going up against all these blind lineups hoping to win a slice of some pot of money or something like that. None of that. It's super easy, super transparent, and super fun over at PrizePicks. PrizePicks gives you projections based upon a player or team or defense or whatever. Sticking with the NFL, like let's say, Derek Carr, they might give you a projection against the Atlanta Falcons of 265.5 yards. All you have to do is find 2 to 6 of those projections and choose more or less. It's that simple. You get those right, you're going up to 25 times your entry back. So go and check them out today over at prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use the promo code in all lowercase LockedOnNFL as well for a first deposit match up to $100. That's a first deposit match up to $100 at prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Promo code LockedOnNFL. PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation, to wrap it up today's episode of Locked On Saints with a look at the injury updates that we got from Dennis Allen with his conference call or from his conference call with us on New Year's Day. Happy New Year, by the way, as we roll into 2024. Hope you got it started off right. The New Orleans Saints are dealing with a couple of injuries that vary in terms of severity. And with only one game left, it's going to be really hard to kind of measure a good bit of it. So let me explain that. So let's start off with Alvin Kamara, because we got some good news. We got some bad news. We also got some news in terms of we're not really sure yet. And the Alvin Kamara one is the biggest story of the injuries, but also we're not really sure where it is yet. So Dennis Allen declined to provide any type of real clarity or specificity on Alvin Kamara's injury, which isn't surprising. When it comes to an ankle injury, there's so many things that have to be done to determine, is it a high ankle sprain? Is it a mid-low ankle sprain? Is it something that's going to, take, you just got to take some pressure off of it for a couple of days? Or is it something where you got to take some pressure off of it for a few weeks? There's a whole lot here. And the Saints, look, they've got a little bit of a not so great history of luck when it comes to ankle injuries. Think back to Michael Thomas. That's where everything started with him, right? So and that's not negligence on the Saints' part. It's just bad luck on ankle injuries. So chill out, get it taken care of. I get it, right? I understand why they're kind of trying to chill on it and just figure it all out. So they kind of call it them day to day. And day to day, that approximation, not very helpful, right? Doesn't really give you a lot of context. But it's something definitely to watch, because not only is this a situation to where you have to gauge whether or not you need Alvin Kamara ready for the game against the Atlanta Falcons on Sunday, but what if you do make the playoffs, right? Now, you get a week off in between the end of the regular season and the playoffs now, so that's helpful. If the Saints do make the playoffs, then maybe that day-to-day, kind of week-to-week, I think I would say more appropriately, and then they kind of get the opportunity to figure it out. So if it's not a high ankle sprain, there's a chance that he's back for the Atlanta Falcons game. There's a chance that he's back for that playoff game if the Saints do make the playoffs. If it is a high ankle sprain, then I would expect him to be done for the remainder of the season and potential postseason. And then, maybe have some off-season rehab and stuff like that, work on it, and then be able to get back into it at the beginning of next year. So it doesn't sound like it's anything that's going to have super long-term effects, but you got to keep it that way, right? And that's where the Michael Thomas thing is kind of in the back of everybody's head. Okay, well, don't, be careful, double check, make sure everything's good, get the thing, and get it all taken care of. So I think you'll see the Saints be very cautious around this, and rightfully so. But fingers crossed that hopefully this isn't a high ankle sprain for Alvin Kamara, and that if the Saints make a postseason run or postseason appearance, that Alvin Kamara, number 41, is able to be out there for him as well. If Alvin Kamara can't go next week against the Atlanta Falcons, hopefully, fingers crossed, Kendre Miller's good to go. Kendre Miller hasn't played a football game since week 9. The Saints passed on drafting Tyjae Spears because of rumors around, or the rumor is that the Saints passed on Tyjae Spears out of Tulane, who went to Tennessee, because of his ACL injury history and all those other things, or lack of ACL, and then the injury history and all those other things. So they draft a guy with an injury history, and so far he hasn't been able to be out on the field. Now, does this tell you all of who Kendre Miller is? No, there's still years of his contract, still years of his career left. Let's see where everything goes. But hopefully this can be a game where he can get out on the field and maybe get some reps alongside Jamal Williams. If not, James Robinson, I would expect him to be active as a game day active standard elevation for this game. So that the Saints have another one of those kind of catch run type running backs in the backfield to pair with Jamal Williams. But I don't think that it's a bad thing to roll with Jamal Williams and just feed him and feed him and feed him and feed him, because the more you give him the ball, the better that he gets throughout a game. The good news for the New Orleans Saints goes to offensive lineman or comes down to offensive lineman Landon Young. Landon Young had to be helped off the field. Looked like he was dealing with a lower leg injury. They did say that they believed it was a knee injury. No surgery needed. He avoided major injury. And look, Dennis Allen was like not cutting corners after the game against Tampa and kind of mentioned that, look, this is the same knee that Landon Young dealt with during training camp. Kept him out for a significant portion of training camp, a little bit at the beginning of the season. There were some question marks around that as well. And so this could potentially be another significant time, like another one that costs him significant time. And that might still be the case. He might not be ready for the Atlanta Falcons game, and therefore, because of the timing of the season, and this is what I was referencing early on as we started this segment here, because of the timing of the season, any injury can be a season-ending injury, because if you miss a week, your season's over, right? Like it's a regular season-ending injury. So that could still be the case for Landon Young, but it sounds like he won't need surgery, so he'll be able to just kind of focus on rehab. Now, the bad news comes down to linebacker Nephi Sewell, who has just grown and grown and grown and grown so much, to the point to where he was getting a lot of those third linebacker reps alongside Demario Davis and Pete Werner. He earned those, while Zach Bond was getting more of those pass rushing reps and everything. Nephi Sewell's ability to play is something that ended up contributing to Zach Bond being able to be utilized more as a pass rusher. In practices, Zach Bond's with the defensive line now, while Nephi Sewell was with those linebackers and continuing to get more reps. So we'll see what happens there, but ACL injury, he's done for the season. He will need off-season surgery. So now the question is, will he be ready for training camp and all those other things? It's not just, will he finish the season? We know the answer to that is no. Now it's like, when will he be ready for next season? So fingers crossed that it doesn't stifle his development too much, because he has been excellent to watch, and he has been growing and growing and growing all season. And I hope that he doesn't lose that momentum with this injury, is able to bounce back, be there for training camp, some portion of training camp at least, if not like OTAs and all that, at least camp, and maybe be able to get started at the beginning of the season, working with those linebackers again and continuing to develop. But it does further create the question mark around, will the New Orleans Saints address linebacker over the course of this offseason? You have a little bit of an aging roster there. You don't necessarily have anybody super reliable at the position defensively behind your two starters. You were starting to get that in Caden Ellis. Then he left. You're starting to get that with Nephi Sewell. Now he has this injury. Is he going to be ready at the beginning of next season? So I think you need to address a little bit of linebacker, inject a little bit more youth. It could be a draft thing, but Saints don't have a lot of draft capital. Could they trade down and pick up some draft capital? I don't know. But if nothing else, like finding some youth maybe in free agency or whatever to help at the position, I think is going to be vital for them over the course of this offseason. So that's your good news, that's your bad news, and then we don't know yet when it comes to Alvin Kamara, which of course we'll continue to keep you up to date with. Coming up tomorrow, it's Wednesday, so we're going to do a little bit of, taking a look at where the Atlanta Falcons are, because the Atlanta Falcons of Week 18 are not the same as the Atlanta Falcons of Week 12 coming off that bye week. So we'll take a look at who the team is, what it all means for them as they continue to move forward. That will probably come out in the afternoon on Wednesday, just because I'm going to be flying back to New Orleans tomorrow morning. So expect that one to be maybe a little bit later than usual, but then we're back to our usual posting schedule Thursday and Friday. Thank you for your patience with that as I wrap up a little bit of a vacation here in Orlando. So appreciate everybody, as always, for making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Make sure you go and check out Locked On Pals. Locked On LSU, Garrett Nussmeier and the LSU Tigers getting that win over Wisconsin in the bowl game. Late second, last second kind of victory there. If you want to hear more about it, Locked On LSU, Caroline Fenton's got you all set up and taken care of and ready to go. Appreciate you, as always, y'all, for making Locked On Saints a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me and the show. As always, if you see me, please say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how you're momming them. And trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you.